Welcome back, everybody. It's great to see everybody for the afternoon. I hope you had a great morning at the conference so far. We had some stimulating sessions for sure. So it's great to see people back for this afternoon. So we're kicking off this afternoon with our first plenary session of the conference. It is with Dr. Dennis Peters, and our topic is student and faculty expectations for learning. Are they aligned? So Dr. Peters is currently our Memorial University's Vice President Academic and also a professor in the Department of Electrical and Computer Engineering in the Faculty of Engineering and Applied Science. So I'd like to welcome Dr. Peters here, and he will introduce his panel for a good discussion on this topic. Thank you. Enjoy.
I don't think I need that one. You should be able to hear me okay, right? That's perfect, good. And thank you, Kim, for the introduction. I was actually going to say welcome and introduce myself, but I guess I won't do that because you've heard that already. So, but I will point out that, my history in university, I've been at the university for just over 25 years, mostly teaching in engineering, electrical computer engineering. So we're going to have an interesting discussion here, I hope, this afternoon, a bit of a panel with a few people. And I'll just start us off with a couple of prompts or a bit of a background, and then we'll lead into a few questions with my panelists. So I think a few among us would argue that education is only about what happens in the lecture halls. I think we would all agree, I hope, most of us would agree that there's much more to the educational experience than this. And there's, of course, research to back that up. And so, according to Vincent Tinto, to thrive, students need integration into formal and informal academic systems and formal and informal social systems. And in our current environment, those social systems would include things like social networks. And research has also backed up that the structure of these, whether they be tight or loose or dense or sparse, can engender different outcomes for students. Of course, none of us has forgotten COVID yet. And so COVID disrupted all of this, disrupted pretty much everything we did. And some of the disruptions from COVID have been long lasting. So this panel this afternoon is going to talk about three questions. It's going to explore and reflect recent reflections within the context of Memorial University. And we're going to gain some personal reflections from current students, both graduate and undergraduate, and faculty. And so I have three panelists, and I'll ask the panelists to come up and have a seat. Maybe I'll say what their name. So the first one is Miss Jenna Freake, who is a Bachelor of Business Administration student. Jenna. And the next one is Dr. Laya Heidari Darani, PhD candidate in linguistics, and Dr. Christine Arnold, Associate Professor, Adult Education, Post-Secondary Studies, and Faculty Education. And I'll ask my panelists to do a 30-second introduction, so your own background. Jenna?
Hi, everybody. My name's Jenna Freake. I grew up in central Newfoundland, and I moved to St. John's to complete a business degree. So I'm working through that while also working as a real estate agent.
Hi, everybody. My name is Laya Heidari Darani. I'm from Iran, so I'm an international student, a PhD student of linguistics. I started my studies here in September 2021.
Hi, everyone. My name is Christine Arnold. I'm a professor in the Faculty of Education. I look at post-secondary education, and I study student transitions and retention, as well as student services and affairs, so all those wonderful supports that our students use and everything we do for them every day.
Thank you very much. And so we have a series of what we've got is three questions, and I'm going to ask one of our speakers to lead on each question, and then we'll have a bit of exchange here. We'll save some time for discussion and questions and answers with the audience towards the end. Just a reminder, of course, when we get to that, we have friends online, and welcome to those online. Don't forget that if you're asking a question, you need a microphone. It's like the conch, right? Okay, so we'll start with the first question. And I'll just read it out. In today's fiscal climate, it's not uncommon to see many students with competing priorities, most notably the need to work while attending university on a full-time basis. While students appreciate the importance of their education, some are unable to dedicate themselves fully to academics due to such financial constraints. What do you feel the university is doing well and or can improve to support students in such situations to ensure equitable access to university education? And I'll ask Jenna to lead on that question.
So when we were discussing this panel, we talked about lots of topics, and this was definitely a hot one. Lots of students find themselves working, whether they're in school full-time or part-time, and I feel that the university does a great job with maintaining an equitable application for online learning. There's lots of courses that you can do online, as well as allowing evening classes and multiple class times for certain courses. I think that moving forward, we can definitely ensure that the students who are working through courses online are getting lots of support, as well as the students who are in class. Yeah.
Okay. Laya, would you like to comment at all on that?
I agree with Jenna because I remember when I started studying here, it was COVID, and then so we didn't have access to in-person classes, or we couldn't see our professors. So and then I personally wasn't working because it was my first semester here. Then I could have access to all the professors we had that semester. Like sometimes because I was just like studying during the day, I couldn't have enough time to have a kind of meeting with the professors. So all of them were really kind to set a meeting like 6 p.m., 7 p.m., and I remember I had a meeting at 9 p.m., and I was really sorry for that, but the professors were really, really kind to set that meeting late. It was just like night. So I think, although I wasn't working that semester, but it was really great for me to be able to have access to all those like facilities that I couldn't have had if it was not COVID. Yeah.
Laya makes a great point. A lot of times we run our services during the day. We're really 9 to 5, and we have to be careful when we admit students that are working, adult mature learners, those who have dependents, other responsibilities, that we look at those student services and we look at our academic supports and we make sure that we make some of those connections and times for students outside of those hours. I think COVID prompted us to do that a little bit, and I hope that we don't avoid that or put it to the floor. I think this is a wonderful opportunity to explore that learners come to us from all aspects, whether it be online, whether it be blended, or whether they be sitting in front of us every day. But those luxuries really depend on where you sit. One thing I will say I think we could do with regard to students working in those fiscal constraints, we have policies at every institution, and we do at Memorial as well, with regard to how many hours you are allowed to work as a student, whether you be undergrad, graduate, etc. Some of those policies can be a little outdated in terms of those hours. And I think what we're finding is those policies that were set some time ago don't always reflect the physical conditions that we're in right now. And so we can find students, I know within my own faculty, back against the wall trying to meet the university's conditions, but also seeing that this doesn't represent the cost of living at the moment. It doesn't represent what I need. I think we do a great job, though, in supporting our students as best we can outside of some of those policies. We have MUSEP funds, we have career services. We try to assist students and make sure that they have availability on campus. I would say as a faculty member, we need to draw on those folks more in student services and supports. We have a wonderful career center. We need to be sure we're bringing them into our classrooms, exposing students to those opportunities, and making sure they're aware of the connections in the community, but also as they sit right here. We can assist those students and make time for them in our office hours, outside, as well as our services.
Thanks, that's interesting. So maybe just if I can probe a little bit on this. What about the impact on those all-important networks? You know, the social networks or the interaction with professors outside of the classroom and that sort of thing. Obviously, you know, if you're working full-time, you don't necessarily have enough time to devote to that. Have you seen that impact?
Personally, I try to communicate with my professors as much as I can back and forth online, and I do meet them in person as often as I can. I feel that the connection that you make with someone in person obviously is different than one you make behind a screen. I just think that the connections that some students may be making when they're working full-time may be important for their life outside of what a connection with a professor would be for their degree.
Or Christine, would you like to?
It can be really challenging to try to make all of those social networks when you have so limited time. One of the things we notice with students that struggle with being able to make those networks with both their peer groups and their professors and administration on campus is that we need to really be able to set those up and encourage them. So it might not be that they're going to come to us. We would hope they'd come to us, but we know that's not always going to be the case. So what moments and what opportunities do we take to introduce ourselves to make sure that there's time and space, and what moments do we have to go poke students and make sure that they're okay? We need to check in socially and emotionally, and we need to make those opportunities. As you said, COVID changed this a little. I know that not only was I so focused on academics and the administration of the courses and the things I do at Memorial, I became really interested in the emotional and the social of the students I was with just as much as those things. It became a 50-50. We needed to make sure that we were giving time for all of those things. And so part of that was, in the courses I had, opening up sessions just for a little bit more of the social interaction, checking in. Where are we today? What should I know about the situation so that I can adapt and we can make that social network within our course, our program, our administrative policies and procedures? If we don't have the open conversations, we don't hear from students and we don't learn.
Yeah, okay. So, and I guess these constraints really impact your learning, right? Obviously they impact the time you have available to spend learning, to devote to your learning. But I think also the connections that you make and the way the learning experience is to you, or is to somebody who has those sorts of constraints, is different. And do you think that really has a lasting impact on the learning?
I would personally say that the lasting impact for the learning is that you take note of the things that will last with you on another aspect that's not academic. I mean, the connections you make with, I have friends from engineering when I started there and switched to business that I still talk to every day. And it's talking about the life of going through university, going on to the next step. It's not so academic. So I think, yes, it does have a lasting impact because I'm not here to speak with other students every day, but I do think that I make the connections that last.
I'm in total agreement with Jenna. I think it's not limited just to academic things. We can have like long-lasting relationship with all those people we have had. Just like it's just maybe at first it's academic, but it may just end up in something non-academic, and a kind of social relationship or social life would be maybe enhanced through all those social networks that we have made during COVID or when we didn't have in-person classes. Yeah.
I think Vincent, Tinto, and Alexander Aston would say that actually the peer group is the most important part of success on any study that's been done in post-secondary education. That really speaks volumes. That peer group, those relations with faculty, the reason for that is that they're so influential. I'm going to date myself here, but I'm going to give an example. If you've ever played the video game The Sims, The Sims used to be, you know, a family that you would set up and all of their daily activities, and they had bars that you had to keep in check all at the same time. So I always refer this in my class as there's an academic bar, but there's a social bar and a health and wellness bar, there's an interaction bar, relationship with your institution bar. We have to keep those all in check every day. And you noticed I named one academic bar. The others were all very much about the whole life of the student and what's going to last well beyond what occurs in that classroom that day. Your interaction with the student is probably going to matter much more in the end and may be more lasting of a story that they tell later than what was on the slide that day.
Okay, thanks. So that's a great segue into the next question. So why don't we lead on to that? So the next question, and I'll ask Laya to take the lead on this one. Students, particularly international students, are often living and studying away from their established social networks and support systems. Do you feel engaging in social networks, either formal or informal, is beneficial to a student's learning experience, and do you believe faculty have a role in creating, facilitating, or even participating in these networks?
I should say it is definitely beneficial. because as an international student, when I came to Canada, I had only one friend with whom I had only kind of online contact. I hadn't seen her before. So other than that friend, I didn't have any friends, so I had to rely on my professors and my classmates. And like I said, it was COVID and we didn't have in-person classes. So we had online classes, and then I think the professors were the main, let's say, help, because if we didn't have those online classes, so I couldn't see those people, I mean, those classmates. So I think the professors played a very important role, and those classes, of course. And then we had, in addition to Bright Space, in which we had the classes, we tried to get in touch more through like different applications and also social networks like Facebook. And I thought especially Facebook was really, really helpful to me, because we could share everything on it, in addition to the like social life that we could present on Facebook. For example, one of my friends, of course, it was not during COVID, it was post-COVID. She went to Nepal, and she was going to attend a very important conference there. So she could share everything that was happening during that conference with all of her classmates, included me. So I think in addition to let's say, those chats or email access that we had, and we could be in touch with our professors and our classmates, the other applications or social networks could be very, very beneficial. And like I said, I think professors and the university were the main help. Otherwise, we couldn't be in contact with each other. We couldn't like help each other either academically or socially. And another thing that is very important was, I remember one of my classmates it was his first, let's say, travel, and he wasn't living by himself, so he didn't know how to cook. So, and then he was living on campus, and he told me, he couldn't have got used to the meals that were offered on campus. So I remember once he told me it's like 36 hours that I haven't had anything. So because we were both from like Islamic countries, so I was familiar with how he could cook like some Islamic food. So I taught him how to cook the food, and then so it was just like, just I think social networks or those things could help him to have, some food. And then he told me, because I haven't had anything, so I couldn't study. So that's like a fact. So if you are not fed well, then you cannot study, and it can have like, let's say, negative effects on your learning and on your studies.
For sure.
Yeah.
Okay. Christine, would you like?
I think, Laya, you mentioned some really interesting pieces about those networks and how they're formed. International students may come to us with some networks or no networks at all, and so we really need to be careful how we put those together. Social networks are not just peers. Social networks are the community in which the students are coming. They're the institution, they're supports and services, they're the employers, they're everything that's going to make up their success, as Laya says. And so with that, I think we really need to, we bring in international students, think about ways that we can make them the 3 C's, I call it. We really need to make them as the first C, collaborators. We need to bring them in and learn from them on our programs and our initiatives, our supports and our courses, and work with them as collaborators in terms of what we put in place to support them. We have to welcome those conversations. The second C is constructors or creators. They have to actually be able to ask to put in some clubs, services, financial, other items that can support them while we're here. We can't claim to know everything that those international students have bringing in. We don't know their backgrounds and their histories, and we need to learn from them. And part of inviting them in our services and supports in our classrooms and administration is that we ask them to be creators. We need to ask them, what do you need? What don't we have? What can we learn from? Some of the most innovative programs here at Memorial University were put in place by students, and we need to ask them. There's a really wonderful concept where I work called design thinking, and that means we don't put together a program on our own. We actually bring in students, and they work with us to put in place the program. They are colleagues one-on-one beside us the entire time, and that process comes from them from the ground up versus us putting in a program and then measuring the outcomes. How often have we done that? We should be looking at the outcomes with the student from day one and asking them what they need. The third C, if you're wondering, is that they need to be connectors. And this is what Layla referenced. She said, I made as connections with that student to be able to cook. I made sure that they had the needs required to be able to study in their academics. Students spread the word. If you have a wonderful program, connection, international students, you have something really great in the community that they're going to benefit from, a scholarship, financial assistance, students will connect the resources for you better than you ever could. If you spread it in your services, supports, classrooms, administrative meetings, students will be the connectors for you. That's the power of the institution. That's the power of campus ecology. We need to include those international students in the ecology, and I think we will find that we can support them even more than we are now and what we could come up with on our own.
Thank you. Jenna?
The only thing I'll have to add to that is that I would agree with both of them that the institution and the university is where a lot of academic and career-like networks start, but as well as friendships and other aspects of the networking that is important.
Okay. I'm interested in exploring a little bit about the different experience for international students, or as we sometimes used to say, students from around the Bay, to the townies, if you like. Because a lot of us a lot of our campus is filled with commuter students who come for class and go home, and they have their networks at home. And for that matter, the kids in the class with them are kids they played hockey with or went to school with or all that sort of thing. But for the international students or the students from around the Bay, there may be one or two people from home, but not a lot, right? And it's a different experience coming into the university.
I think coming in from central Newfoundland opposed to coming from out of province or even out of country, when I showed up here, I knew this person from St. John's, I knew this person from Springdale, I knew this person from over here. I think that when the Newfoundlanders come to Memorial, it just is like a meeting place, and then you reconnect. You would have had a lot of those connections previous, but yeah, it's a really nice reconnection.
But Laya, I assume that wasn't your experience to come in and find people from home. Your mic.
Yeah, I think it is not just like what I said. I think emotionally speaking, for an international student, being in touch with different people is very important. Not just the people from their own country or let's say neighboring countries, but I found people here, the Newfoundlanders, really kind, and I think even sometimes when I was walking on the street, even a hi or a smile could make me really happy. And I was thinking, okay, although I don't have my family here, the people here and their kindness can make me just study hard and let's say struggle for all my goals to attain all of them. And it is not just, I think, being an international student here. I think all the people here have helped me a lot.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. But of course, sometimes it's nice to have someone who can at least teach you how to cook the foods you're familiar with, for example, right? Christine, did you want to comment on that at all?
Leah, we agree a lot today. I am not obviously an international student, but I am not from Newfoundland and Labrador. This has become my home over the last 8 years. I'm from Ontario, but I have no family here. And so I moved here to create a family, both within this institution and outside of it, and I needed to get to know all of you. I think that a large strength of this institution over the others that I have worked at, as well as other parts of Canada, are that everyone is so friendly. This is a community. People reach out, they contact one another, and they're never afraid to help. One of the wonderful things I found during this time, and I think for students as well, is that there were socials. We were invited to get to know people, there were introductions, there were walkthroughs of various items on campus. I didn't know what was here. I wasn't sure what all the offices were, the divisions, the departments, the units. You don't know what you don't know sometimes. And what was great is those introductions were so helpful. And they started to make you feel at home, which was really great. Some of the folks in this very audience made me feel like home on some of those worst days when I was homesick. And now I never want to leave. But I have to say, those moments of outreach and the socials and the dinners and the introductions to things on campus, the Q&As that were for the folks that you should really know this, we really don't know this. It was absolutely wonderful to have those things. Please provide those to students. Please provide them to faculty and administrators as well. We all need them, and we need to work together.
Thanks, that's interesting. And so let me put a different hat on it. I'll put on my professor hat for a minute, and maybe it's my engineering hat too, being a little bit of an introvert, but I'm often hesitant to engage with students in social settings or outside of very structured formal settings, really. And maybe that's a bit of work-life balance. Students are my work, and sometimes we got to cut off a bit. But also, I guess there's an inherent risk of social interactions where there is a power balance or power imbalance. Would anyone like to change my mind?
I'll just give a personal example. Dr. Trella was my volleyball ref on my volleyball provincials this weekend, and I had a lovely conversation with him. So I guess it just all depends on the moment and to read the room a little bit and just see what it's like. But yeah, I would never stop, and I would just say hello. I would never walk by. I would just always say hello to the professor.
Either one?
I have to say, when I talk about social networks with my students and when I present, I talk about and start with some pictures of my children. Not everyone might be comfortable about that, but I want to demonstrate what a social network is as a professor. A social network is getting to know me, that you feel you can ask those questions, you become a part of that group or cluster that we're going to engage in learning for that semester, and you can rely on the others within that group as critical friends, I call them. Those friends where you can go for constructive items, sources and resources in your learning. You can ask them questions, how to cook a meal, how to coach volleyball. You can ask all of those things. And so I do share a little bit about myself. We have to be careful with privacy, but I am wanting to let them in to know who I am a little bit, and I have some of those same struggles. Especially during COVID, we have those moments where I need to say, here are 5 things that happened in my world that went wrong today. What's happening in yours? Because no, we don't have it all together. We're the same as all of the students we're engaging with. I have to say some interesting things we've done in the Faculty of Education that have been great with regard to social and professors and bridging that gap. We've had some wonderful socials that we've gone out to various places on campus and invited students to come with us, particularly our grad students. We also have grad speaker series where we ask students to come and present their work alongside us as colleagues, which is a wonderful thing. I also came from the University of Toronto, and there we actually had a faculty in residence program, which was really interesting. Faculty would come to residence for a night. They would sign up, and for that night, they would bring an activity that they wanted to do with the students. It was a really successful program. It was exciting. Sometimes it was yoga, sometimes it was art, watercolor, sometimes it was mathematically plotting a chart. It was all very interesting. Some more exciting than others. But those faculty in residence were a really great way to break down the barriers. Obviously, those students in residence, some of them had that instructor, some of them did not, but it didn't matter. It was the fact that we were seen as a faculty as being really open, available, and yes, it was more of a controlled, formalized setting, but it also had those informal moments of getting to know you and the jokes and the aspects that we all strive for. So I think we can do that within parameters. The benefits are large. I'm biased. I look at student affairs and services. We interact with students on levels, every day that are far beyond sometimes what we do in the classroom, but it's needed for sure.
Okay, thanks. So we'll move on to our third question. So how do you think faculty should assist students in creating social networks throughout their academic and social post-secondary education experiences, formal and informal? And also, what is the importance of these social networks when promoting student success? And I'll start with you, Christine.
All right, I'll kick us off. Student success is really important, and as I said earlier, social networks refer to many items on campus. I would argue in this question that it is essential that we assist students with their social networks. If we have admitted students to come to this campus to be with us, then we need to ensure that their student success is our top priority, and we're looking at them as such. With that being said, yes, the peer group can be that source. We can set up connections within our classrooms, dense and loose. We can make sure we have various groups. But what's also really important for those social networks is when we're teaching, we're looking at the networks within the field in which we're teaching. COVID forced us to look at those networks in terms of, all right, I'm going to be a teacher, for example, or I'm going to be a nurse. What are the various networks, the scholars, the absolute experts in the field that my students should know? If I can't invite them in to be a guest speaker, if I can't actually visit there because of distance, who are those folks and how do we make those connections among them? Because that's part of students feeling comfortable with what they're studying and what they're going to do when they leave here, and that they feel like they have a social network there too. There's also the faculty social network. Yes, you should feel with faculty administrators that you can be able to ask them those questions as well. There's also employers. Students are hoping to come out at some point, not just the experts in their field, but also the employer social networks. Where are they going to be? Will this matter? Will they need further education? Where will they go? Do you have connections with the university or college down the road or in the next province over that will need to assist? We need to make sure we're making those networks for students too. So yes, it's friends and peers. They're the most important. But we have other social networks that we really have to look at and make sure that we're setting them up intentionally. Students should have various social networks. They should have a network of social networks. And that's what's really important here if we're going to make sure that they feel needed and they feel wanted and that they're actually integrated into the institution. You can come and attend and walk out that classroom door and hop in your car or on the bus or walk home any day. Do you feel like you belong here? Did you set up roots here? That's the connection to student success across all of the literature, and all of the people you speak with will say, if you have a connection, if you feel like you want to be here, you said I want to make these folks proud, that's the connection. That's the roots spreading out.
Thanks. Jenna, would you like to comment?
I definitely think that the faculty should assist and be supportive in creating networks, whether they're social within peers or academic with other professors or other universities. But Christine, I like your point about the career and where these people are going to go afterwards. Some people come to university because their parents are like, you must get a degree, you get a degree, and then what do you do with it afterwards? So I definitely think that that's a good point. Pointing people in a good direction for a career or what's next is definitely beneficial.
Yeah.
I personally believe in collaborative learning, and I think with all the students, or maybe most of them, can learn from their peers a lot. And I have learned many things from my classmates during these 3 years, and I think the professors, and we all know that if we learn something and if we can add something to what we have learned, then it can be called success. So I have to say that the professors play a very important role, because they are just like connecting to different students, and then when they see they have something common, then they just like connect those two students, because sometimes maybe we don't have enough time to talk about everything. We are just focusing on some specific things, and then this is the professor who tries to know each student well, and then he is the person who connects those students who have something in common. And then I think this could lead to progress and finally to success for both the students who have been paired and also for all the students in the class.
Okay. So Christine, maybe I can ask you in particular on this. Once again, I'm an engineer, very practical minded. I want to know what's the answer? What's the solution? So how do we encourage these social networks? I've tried, in fact, in my own teaching to, have chat rooms set up in Brightspace. And no offense to anyone who's dealing with Brightspace, but it hasn't really worked very well in terms of the students don't engage with each other that way. Can you give me any tips?
Sure. I actually headed over to the Faculty of Business at the beginning of this year for a retreat that they were having, and I gave them a few tips on how you could put together some of these social networks. I wanted to hear from them too, because they had some wonderful, interesting things to say. One of the things I find, if you're looking at Brightspace, I find students will provide you with some information on what's going well and not well throughout a course. You get a sense of how things are going. Sometimes it's, I really need assistance with writing, or sometimes it's, you know, I don't feel connected enough to the students in this group because we're all sitting here online and I don't know who you are. With that being said, I would open up an open form in Brightspace, have them fill it out for a week, and then I would put down the top 3 concerns. Then I would say, okay, from the top 3, we're gonna vote. And now we're going to have a session on one of those together. I was starting to build their trust. This was your session. You asked for this session. So they felt like responsibility. They wanted to be there. I wasn't asking for this session. You were asking. So let me bring in some folks and make some social networks from various parts of the university. Maybe counseling should be there. Maybe, you know, disability studies should be there. Maybe someone from administration to field registration questions should be there. So what was interesting is by asking them, I felt like I had greater attendance. It was really wonderful because all of a sudden it was their session. They took ownership, which was that co-creation or collaborators piece. The other thing I felt that was really great, it's just a simple thing, but we don't always do it. We have a host of services and supports on campus. I find sometimes my fellow faculty members don't know who those people are. They don't know the faces, they don't know they exist. What would they do? How would they support me? I put a list of those in all of my Brightspace course shells, and I also put them on my syllabi. What's really important then is I walk them through who those people are and what they do at the beginning of the semester. It's a simple, easy thing, but sometimes we just don't know what we just don't know. And then in moments, students felt like they could ask me about those places. I do need writing assistance. I do need to meet with someone of the registrar. I need to switch out of this. I'm having a problem with finance. Things that are not my purview, but they are someone else's on campus and they're experts and they want to hear from you. So I was trying to make those connections for students beyond myself sometimes. I found that was a great way for those social networks. One of the other things I said, check-ins. It wasn't just meeting about the assignment that was due next. I also always do that. However, these were the social emotional check-ins, and we would come and choose an icebreaker to begin with. So I would say to students, we're going to choose a bit of an icebreaker. What do you want to bring for that session that day? And so we actually started to have some of those motivating pieces in our courses. We're busy. There's not always a lot of time for that and to set up extra sessions. But I found when I did, they were helpful. And guess what? Students attended the assignment session that was not mandatory to learn how to do that in plethora when all of a sudden I had a session the following week to see how they were doing because I cared about them, and suddenly they actually started to care about me, which was great. So we became a network, we became a community, and I think that's the biggest thing. One of the other things I think in making social networks with students ourselves, and then I'll stop, is that COVID also forced us to be a little creative in our teaching. There were moments that I had been asking for folks to be creative for years and some would not come on board, but in these moments we didn't have 4 assignments, you could have 3. You only had time for 2. You know, we had to really think about this, and so that was a moment for students to become constructors and co-creators as well. I said to them, all right, we're gonna do a bit of a choose your own adventure, your own map. I can't offer 4 assignments anymore. So what 3 would you like and how would you weight them? And I want an explanation according to where you are in this moment and what makes most sense for your learning. What I found is in those moments when I asked what were the topics that were most important, what were the assignments that were most important, how were you going to use them, I kept that afterwards. I actually kept that piece rolling in the courses. They get to choose their own map, they get to decide why something's more important than another topic, and I get to see why that's so important. I have nurses and residents and administrators and deans. I have folks out on an oil rig in my classes. They're all not coming from the same place. I need to say, why are you sitting here? What matters and what pieces? Not every week is going to be as equally important. And if I think it is, I'm wrong. So let's make sure we know what it is and you can explain to me and we'll equitably distribute your learning then in that course.
Thanks. Jenna, or?
I think your last point where people come from everywhere and they're not all joining your classroom with the same mentality that this week is worth 10%, this week is worth 10% is super important. I think that oftentimes as a student, sometimes not all professors or not all other students, but forget that not every student is the same and that not every student comes to Memorial Monday to Friday, 8 to 4 to sit down in a classroom and that there's not other things on the go. And it doesn't have to be work, it could just be life, you could be not feeling well, and having that option to say, hey, I have a family event planned that week, I'm not going to be able to sit down and do all that work. Could I weigh another assignment later on in the semester to weigh more? That's definitely beneficial to a person's learning when they can opt out for those things.
Yeah, I think I agree with both, and I think this is not just teaching and learning. Many other factors are involved, and if professors just like try to sometimes listen to the students, sometimes let them open up, I think that would be a great idea for them, just like to help them to achieve what they're just like looking for.
Thanks. So we've allowed a little bit of time here. We've got about 10 minutes left, I think, before the session's over, and so we'll move into question period, I think. So I'd like to encourage conversation from the audience, engagement in this discussion. If you have points to raise or if you have questions for the panelists, please let us know. Wait for a microphone, of course, but we have some runners here for microphones. And if we have any online, I don't know who's got the online? Yeah. So if there's anyone online with questions, they can put them on as well. Anyone?
One thing that came into my mind, it's a little bit between 1 and 2. I teach first-year students, and I have a lot of international students in my class. I often see that these international students are working more hours than students from Canada, and I think they maybe have more of a struggle than our Canadian students do, because they're working more and they're sleeping less. And these are very bright students, but they don't perform quite as well as their counterparts from Canada just because of the extra demands on their lives. What can MUN do to help them?
Good question. Anyone like to take that? Anyone got a simple short answer that we can fund with nothing?
All right. I don't think there is, no simple short answer. I think any walk of student could be in that position, to be honest, international or domestic, and I think I've seen it in all. So I want to be clear there. But I see what you mean. And what I find, one thing I mentioned was some of our policies and procedures around work, et cetera. Also post-enrollment then, what does it mean to be full-time and part-time, and how can we be flexible with those definitions? I worked at many institutions, and we can be flexible, and so there is some flexibility there. As a professor, though, as a faculty member, I have to say one of the largest things I have found is that I need to be flexible. So I need to be sure that if folks need a little more time to complete some of the pieces in the course, if I have some rolling deadlines and everyone's aware of that, I make sure that all students have the same option, mind you, but I make sure that there's a rolling deadline for that first assignment of a week. I also, if folks are struggling, like I said, I tend to check in or have open forums for them to come. That can be personal or group. I've mentioned a lot about group, but those individual ones are really important as well. I let them know I'm always available for those conversations. The large undergraduate courses are one of the things that is the most challenging, and the Faculty of Business informed me about that earlier this fall when I met with them too. And I think there are some struggles there as well. One of the things that I found is when there's too much to be able to complete all the assignments or all of the pieces to that level because of work and lack of sleep and dependence and other things, then I've started to team up on those pieces and have either groups or handoffs of those, or the roles vary in those pieces. You don't always have to be the author of the paper. You could have been the editor of the other, you could be the check, you could be the person who completes this assignment or this quiz. Of course, we need to make sure they cover all the material, but the role always doesn't have to be the same, and it always doesn't have to be on the student to complete, everything on their own. So in partnership, in groups, like I said, with a bit of a rolling piece or in a mentorship or a critical friends. I mentioned critical friends. That's worked really well. Critical friend groups, if we put together pods of 4 or 5, I generally do, and they rotate the positions so that all students are getting a piece of that assignment, is really helpful. Group work can be a nightmare, let's be honest, but I found if they're assigned a role and they rotate that role and they start to form more of a community and you check in with that role and you're a part of that community, is the biggest piece when group work goes rogue, is when that professor's not there. It can assist. There's no silver bullet. I feel for you. I mean, we are all in this situation. Do you both have any suggestions? Because we need to learn.
The only thing that I was going to say is that the professor being aware and acknowledging the fact that the student is in fact working would be very beneficial.
Yeah, as an international student, I should say that not all international students come from a rich family. So they just come to Canada or they go abroad to try hard in order to make a better life. So they have to work. So it is something that everyone knows, and I'm sure all professors already know that. But you're totally right, and I think we shouldn't just leave the assignments aside just because we are working. But the suggestion that I can make here, I think like what Kristen said, is just having some teamwork. I think that would help the students a lot, because sometimes there's just like an assignment with 3 or 4 questions, and then the students can choose among those like 3 or 4 questions, and then if we have a person beside us, then we can work together, and I think we can just like divide our responsibilities and we can share. It is not just putting half of the assignment on one person's shoulders and half on another student, I mean. So we can just do half and half, and then we can share the results. So I think finally we can answer all 4 questions, and we can learn about all those 4 questions. But we just have put half time that we need to do all those 4 questions in the assignment.
Okay, thanks. Other comments or questions from the audience? This one over here.
Hi, I have a question about sort of the impact on faculty and staff who are doing this highly engaged, personalized, emotionally demanding work. Because as we know, faculty are under enormous amounts of stress to produce publications and do all of the other elements of their contracts. Per course instructors are barely paid for the work that they're doing, let alone additional emotional labor on top of that. So how do we balance this desire and I think this intrinsic motivation to do the best for students and really help them succeed in all of these ways with the limitations of what faculty and staff are able to put into their jobs above what they already have on their plates?
That's a good one. I was going to say, Jennifer's not here anymore, right? The provost isn't with us anymore, so she could just fix that, I'm sure. Anyone want to take that?
Okay. No, that's okay. It's a great question. What I found is that when I started to complete some of these engagement pieces I spoke about today, and many of them were quite personalized, they were engaged, they took time. What I found though is getting them off the ground was the work, right? So putting in the choose your own adventure, putting in the how much do you want this to be weighed, having the social and emotional check-in sessions, all of those things. That was the work in the beginning. But over time, now I'm into the second and third iteration of those pieces, and I'm finding it's less. Because now I have students just attending the sessions, which it's not pulling teeth in 50 reminder emails. I can send one and they're there, which is amazing. Some of the pieces I'm grading a little less because I've actually asked them, what is important to you? I'm not grading everything with that, same level as I was before, in the sense that now I know you've chosen 3. These matter to you. I'm going to give you full feedback on these 3. A lot of our courses, talking about Brightspace, have the lovely discussion forum. And I apologize for all those here that have a link to Brightspace. I'll just say this. I've banned the discussion forum in my courses, but the reason is this. I think that a lot of time it encourages a Q&A kind of regurgitation. And instead what I found is over the 12 or 13 weeks, now I ask students to complete 6. But what I do is it's an experiential model. I call them think blots. And in those think blots, I say to students, you choose 6. Not every week is going to be equally important. I want you to respond to your colleagues all 12, but I want you to actually post 6 because it's an exercise. It's a task. You're being given a problem. I want you to go out and test that app in higher education. I want you to do a scavenger hunt on the campus of Sheridan and Humber College. I actually want you to look at a policy from the University of Western. I want you to compare it with Queen's University and then Kwantlen University. What's interesting about this is that now instead of 12 or 13, when I'm giving really watered down feedback, I'm giving wonderful feedback for those 6 weeks for those students, and they're giving feedback to each other otherwise. And the choose your own, I'm also only looking at those pieces. So what I've found is including students as the co-creators and the collaborators has actually led to a bit of a less of a workload in the sense that I can target what really matters to them. I think we can all say we've been bogged down with the 50 assignments, the 100 assignments, the question and answer, the I need, a meeting, etc. cetera, et cetera. But what I found is if I actually gear it to the students a little more, then it actually becomes a little more targeted. I can focus my energy, which was never possible when I first started here. So that's been a real moment of motivation. I'm wondering if you can reduce down some of it and really focus on the pieces that matter and ask them a little bit, will you find that it will be a little less for you? Maybe not. That's hard to do in all courses, but.
Okay, thanks. I think that's about time, right? Yep. Okay, so I thank you. I'll thank our panelists. Thank you all for coming. Thank you for listening.